Hi, my name's Simon Glynn, and I'm going to be teaching an Introduction to Philosophy course this upcoming semester. And with all introductory classes, we're going to begin at the beginning. We're going to ask what philosophy is and how do philosophers gain knowledge, how do they know what they know. We're going to ask, does the real world exist? And if so, is it the way that it appears? Other topics will include, does God exist? The nature of the human mind and the relationship between the physical and the mental, sometimes called the mind-body problem. Whether our actions are free or whether our actions are determined by circumstances and environment, or on the other hand, brain physiology. We're going to talk about and question what morality is and what it is we ought to do. And most of all, we're going to learn from these inquiries what it is to do philosophy and what it is to think critically. So some of these questions appear fairly obvious on the face of it, but let's just take one of them. How do we know what we know, or do we know what the truth is? Well, here's a problem. Socrates told us that either we know what the truth is or we don't know what the truth is. If we know what the truth is, there's no point in searching for it because we already know. If we don't know what the truth is, then there's no point in looking for it because we won't recognize it when we find it. Yet there seems to be something wrong with that, because we do indeed sometimes search for truths and the truth about certain things, and we do indeed seem to recognize it when we find it, yet we didn't seem to know it previously. So how can we come to terms with that? How can we justify our views and beliefs? What about questions like the existence of the material world, the real world? We all agree that when we look at the world that we see, at least the way that we see it, is it's constantly interrupting and changing. So, for example, if I'm sitting at a railway station and a train is coming towards me, it appears to be getting bigger to me. To somebody at the station that it's leaving, the train appears to be getting smaller. The train can't be getting bigger and smaller at the same time. And so we say, well, what we're actually doing is we're experiencing appearances of the train. What about the person on the train? We'll say, well, the train remains the same size. So for that person, the train they're experiencing appearances as well. But many people say, no, they're not. They're experiencing reality. How do we know the world and they aren't getting twice as big every second, or that they and the world aren't getting twice as small every second? So it turns out that actually we're experiencing appearances. So the question then becomes, how are the experiences or appearances that we think we're experiencing related to reality? We think we experience color, and yet physics tells us that really what we're experiencing is light of a certain frequency hitting our eye, which gives us the impression of colour, that there really isn't colour in the world. The existence of God, that's interesting. It depends often on how you define God. People define God, for example, as immaterial and everywhere, ubiquitous. But if you're immaterial, then you don't exist in the material world, and therefore you can't be everywhere. They also define God often as God the Father, as male, at least in some traditions. Again, if you're immaterial, you can't be male or female. So we have to be clear about the claims we make. And what, for example, in the absence of the clarity on that, where, for example, do we think we might derive morality? Is it possible to have a world of morality without having a God? And what would such a morality look like? Are our actions free or determined? This is another interesting question. I mean, I have a material body and I have a brain. And I have a strong view and strong belief, for which I have quite a lot of evidence, that my thoughts and my ideas are related in some way to my brain. After all, if I were to drink alcohol, which would affect my brain, it would affect my thoughts and my ideas, or at least my consciousness, my awareness. And if people lose bits of their brain, then sometimes they're unable to have thoughts and memories that they previously were able to have. Now, we know of the physical world, at least we think we know the physical world, that its actions and behaviours are causally determined. And yet human beings claim to have free choice. So here's the difficulty. If the consciousness is somehow arising from or related to the brain, and the brain is causally determined, then what makes us think that we're able to escape our brain physiology to make have free choice? Or is it because of our brain physiology and its complexity that we can have freedom of choice? And to what extent does the environment, our upbringing, our nurture, if you like, influence our choices, and to what extent, therefore, can they truly be said to be free? This is a philosophical question. These are the kinds of issues that we're going to deal with in the Introduction to Philosophy, some other issues as well. And I hope some of you who find this interesting will be able to come along and enjoy exploring these questions with me.